In order to satisfy his perverted desires, Bullied Boy shot Cupid's arrow at his own aunt. The red arrow slowly merged into her body, and in the next moment, his sexy aunt pounced on him. The man's name is Akira, who has been an orphan since he was young and had to live with his aunt. However, his aunt and uncle abused him every day, even denying him food. Even his younger siblings often beat and scolded him. Over time, Akira lost the will to live. He went to the rooftop, ready to end his miserable life. Just before hitting the ground, an angel saves him, catching him in her arms and sparing him from an imminent death. Because Akira's life was so miserable, he was chosen by the gods to become a candidate for divinity. Bewildered, Mirai initially believes he has died and that this angel, with strikingly large buttocks, is taking him to heaven. However, the celestial figure, who introduces herself as Nasse, explains that she has saved him and shows him how the world continues on as if nothing had happened. Overwhelmed by his desire to end his suffering, Mirai pleads with her to let him die. Nasse refuses and promises her mission is to make him happy. Nasse begins to delve into Mirai's past, revealing that his family died in an accident 7 years ago, and that he has since lived a life of abuse under the care of his aunt and uncle. Mirai insists he has no friends or reason to continue living. In response, Nasse explains that he is special and has the right to live a fulfilling life. To help him achieve this, she offers 2 gifts, a pair of angel wings, allowing him to fly wherever he wishes, and a red Cupid's arrow capable of making anyone fall in love with him for 33 days. Startled, Mirai jokingly asks for both powers, but Nasse grants his request. To test his newfound abilities, Nasse encourages him to summon the wings. With some effort, Mirai manages to make them emerge from his back, leaving him astonished. Despite his initial doubts, he soon allows himself to enjoy the experience of flying, taking in a unique view of the sunset and the ocean. During this journey, Mirai weeps with emotion, though his sadness lingers as he reflects on his life. Upon returning, Nasse suggests using the red arrow to manipulate someone into loving him. However, during their conversation, Nasse reveals that Mirai's aunt and uncle were responsible for his family's death. Though skeptical, Mirai decides to confront them. At home, he uses the red arrow on his aunt, who, under its influence, confesses that she and her husband murdered his parents out of greed to claim the family inheritance. The confession includes harrowing details. The couple orchestrated an accident to kill the family, but Mirai survived by chance. Consumed by the arrow's effects, his aunt takes her own life in front of everyone present. Nasse, observing the scene, assures Mirai that there is nothing more to be done for them. As memories of his kind-hearted mother flood back, Mirai begins to accept his existence and expresses gratitude for being alive, even though the pain remains overwhelming. Over the following days, Mirai faces new challenges as he realizes he must now take responsibility for his life and start living. While he uses his wings and the arrow to acquire food and find shelter, he quickly understands that happiness cannot be found in a life built on deceit. He dreams of a normal life, friends, school, and a family of his own. However, Nasse's revelation that he is one of 13 candidates chosen to become the next god complicates his situation even further. According to Nasse, if he does not win this competition, he will lose his powers and his chance to live a fulfilling life. As tradition dictates, when the position of new god becomes vacant, 13 angels select 13 humans, and from them the new god will emerge. The candidates have 999 days to achieve this goal. Mirai has made her decision. She wants to use the white arrow to protect innocent people and the red arrow to force her uncle to turn himself into the police for his crimes. In this way, she hopes to find her own happiness without aspiring to become a god. Feeling more at peace, Mirai sits down to eat while watching television. On the screen appears a second-rate comedian named Tonma, who boasts of having 5 girlfriends. Curiously, an angel named Luda watches over him. When Mirai asks Nasse about the red arrow, she explains that it cannot be dodged unless the target is protected by angel wings, as the arrow is too fast. She also reveals that its effect lasts only 33 days and cannot be used on the same person more than once. Elsewhere, the comedian is shown surrounded by women in a car, all under the influence of the red arrow. As he laughs and brandishes his own arrow, a man dressed as a superhero suddenly appears and shoots him with a white arrow. This breaks the effect of the red arrow. The next day, the news reports the comedian's death. Days pass, and after taking the college entrance exam, Mirai gets his uncle to turn himself into the police and transfer all his assets to him. With this money, Mirai buys an apartment, but despite his new life, he doesn't feel truly happy. His burden becomes heavier when he learns of Tonma's death. Later, a broadcast on a giant screen catches his attention. A group of bank robbers are killing hostages. Suddenly, a man in costume, calling himself Metropoliman, appears on the scene. While the civilians believe him to be a superhero, Mirai notices that he has angel wings, confirming that he is another candidate. Metropoliman uses his red arrow to control the police, forcing them to stop the robbers. In a standoff, he skillfully dodges the criminals' gunfire and kills one of them with his white arrow. He eventually frees the hostages and declares himself a superhero on national television. He claims that the robber's death was accidental, but Mirai knows that the white arrow guarantees 100% lethality. In his speech, Metropoliman claims to have come from space to eliminate the villains, clearly referring to the other god candidates. He also admits to having killed one of them. This alarms Mirai, who asks Nasse to keep his distance, as his presence could expose him as a candidate. Mirai begs to be removed from the list of candidates. However, Nasse explains that giving up his wings and arrows would mean his death, as they are a symbol of hope. He also explains the hierarchy of angels. Special rank angels can grant wings, red arrows, and white arrows. First rank angels can only grant wings and red arrows, and second rank angels can grant only one of the two. Furthermore, an angel's rank can rise or fall based on their behavior. The next day, Mirai decides to face his fears and attends his first day of college. Meanwhile, Metropoliman, in his civilian identity, reveals himself to be a white-haired student who maintains a cover to remain unnoticed. Nasse suggests to Mirai that he use the red arrow on Saki, his childhood friend and college classmate, to make her fall in love with him. According to Nasse, if love blossoms during the 33 days the arrow is in action, it might become genuine. However, Mirai rejects the idea and chooses not to manipulate people's feelings. While walking to school, Mirai spots an angel floating above the students. Trying to remain calm and act normal, he catches the attention of the angel, Revel, who notices his nervousness and descends rapidly to confront him. Revel introduces himself as the guardian angel of a nearby student, standing just behind Mirai. Turning around, Mirai is startled to see Saki, his childhood friend, who unexpectedly draws a red arrow and shoots it straight into Mirai's heart. Overcome with emotion, Mirai impulsively confesses his love to her on the spot. Saki is visibly shaken by his sudden declaration. Sensing her distress, Mirai gently grabs her shoulders and promises that he will do anything for her. Revel intervenes to diffuse the tension and urges them to leave. Later, still dazed by what happened, Mirai sneaks into Saki's house. There, Nasse, his guardian angel, takes the opportunity to explain the details of candidate ranks and their associated powers. Nasse reminds Mirai that as a special rank candidate, he has unique abilities, including the white arrow and wings. She also warns him about the danger posed by another powerful candidate, Metropoliman. Saki, however, lacks wings, making her vulnerable. Without hesitation, Mirai offers to share his wings so they can fly together. Holding hands, they connect their angel bracelets, and, embracing each other, they begin practicing flight. During this moment, Mirai fondly recalls their childhood, reminiscing about the days they spent together before his parents' tragic deaths. Hoping to cheer her up, he promises to take her to a high vantage point where they can see the world below. While in Saki's room, their moment is interrupted by a notification on her phone. Metropoliman has apprehended a criminal. Revel voices his concerns, suspecting that Metropoliman might be scheming against the other candidates. The influence of the red arrow drives Mirai to impulsively want to intervene, but Nasse stops him, reminding him that he's being manipulated. Nasse explains a critical detail. If a candidate dies, their powers, including wings and arrows, are transferred to their angel, who can then grant them to another candidate. She suspects that Revel may be exploiting Saki for his own gain. Despite the rising tensions, the angels agree to work together to protect their respective candidates. Both Revel and Nasse conclude that Mirai and Saki are safer together, reducing their vulnerability if they stay united. The next day, a live broadcast from Metropoliman catches everyone's attention. In it, he announces his desire to meet the other candidates for a peaceful dialogue. The meeting is scheduled to take place in an open-roof stadium, a location chosen to allow easy access for angels and to signal his transparency. Despite suspecting a trap, Mirai and Saki decide to attend, leaving their angels behind to avoid drawing attention. Once at the stadium, the tension is palpable. Civilians, journalists, and television helicopters crowd the venue, eagerly anticipating Metropoliman's appearance. From the stands, Mirai spots multiple angels hovering above the crowd, confirming the presence of other candidates. As the situation unfolds, Mirai and Saki steel themselves for what seems to be an inevitable confrontation with Metropoliman and the dangers he represents. While Mirai and Nasse watch the broadcast from Saki's house, tension builds in the stadium. A civilian begins a countdown to 3 p.m., and at the exact hour, Metropoliman makes his appearance at the center of the stadium. He is not alone. Two candidates in similar suits emerge and confront him. One of them, dressed in blue, shoots a red arrow, but it fails to pierce Metropolimon. Mirai quickly deduces that this is not the real one, but an imposter in disguise. The blue and yellow candidates face him, shouting for him to reveal his identity. The audience, now confused, begins to doubt the supposed hero's legitimacy. Standing back to back, the candidates recall how they became god candidates. Both failed to enter university, and, in a desperate act, attempted to take their lives together with pills. However, their angels offered them a second chance as gods candidates, promising mutual happiness. Returning to the present, the blue candidate analyzes that the red arrow has a limited range of 31 meters, concluding that the real Metropolimon cannot be far from the center of the stadium. They also explain that their back-to-back position protects them from surprise attacks. At that moment, the real Metropolimon appears on one of the stadium's screens and begins discussing the arrows and wings, further unsettling the civilians. The blue candidate takes the fake Metropolimon hostage, threatening him for information. Meanwhile, a small girl floats down from the stands, pleading for protection from Metropolimon. Although hesitant at first, the blue candidate agrees to help her on the condition that she accepts being struck with a red arrow. The girl consents, but as she approaches, the real Metropolimon appears and strikes her with his own red arrow, taking her with him. Metropolimon then demands the cooperation of other candidates hiding in the crowd, but only if they allow themselves to be struck with a red arrow. Soon after, two new candidates appear, dressed in pink and green, ready to join the group. However, as the blue and yellow candidates move closer to strike them with arrows, the stadium screen lights up again. On it, the girl reveals that the real Metropolimon had been pretending to be the imposter in the center of the stadium the entire time. Seizing the distraction, Metropolimon strikes the yellow candidate with a red arrow and eliminates the blue one with a white arrow. The angel of the blue candidate attempts to retrieve their wings and rings, but Metropolimon confronts them, reminding them that by the rules, these now belong to him. Resigned, the angel relinquishes the items and takes the soul of the blue candidate. In the next phase of the event, Metropolimon presents the girl and the yellow candidate in chains. He demands that they die to atone for their mistakes, but both refuse, feeling no guilt. Metropolimon aims his white arrow at the yellow candidate and eliminates him instantly. He then turns his attention to the girl, who begins to scream and cry out desperately for help. This moves Mirai, who hesitates between intervening or remaining hidden to protect his identity as a candidate. When Metropolimon attempts to eliminate the girl as well, her angel tries to justify her actions, but this act stirs Mirai's anger. Just as he is about to use his rings and wings, Mirai stops upon seeing Nasse fly toward the stadium, fearing that both of them may be exposed as candidates. A mysterious figure takes a photograph of Mirai Kakehashi and Saki Hanekego as they gaze at the sky. Tension rises when Mirai notices the situation but decides they should remain still. Metropolimon appears, using the young girl as a hostage. Mirai tries to stay calm while assessing how to act. Meanwhile, Metropolimon fires a white arrow, killing the girl and making it clear that he has no need for hostages if no one intervenes. Saki feels powerless in the face of this loss, while Mirai begins to reflect on his inability to make decisive choices. This inner conflict brings back a lesson from his father about avoiding hatred, as it leads to no happiness. Despite his doubts, Mirai concludes that Metropolimon must be eliminated. Suddenly, a mysterious man appears on the balcony of the room where Mirai and Saki are hiding. This man is Nanato Mukado, another god candidate, who seeks to collaborate in the fight against Metropolimon. Nanato proposes that they strike him with a red arrow as a gesture of trust, but Nasse assures them that Nanato is telling the truth. Nanato shares his story. He has terminal cancer, and though initially chosen as a candidate, he decided not to pursue divinity. Instead, he used the red arrow to ensure financial stability for his family, influencing 14 detectives to track down trustworthy candidates. His goal is to guarantee a fair process in selecting the next god and to secure a safe future for his loved ones. Mirai, initially reluctant, agrees to work with him under the condition that Nanato undergoes treatment for his illness, arguing that he must live for the sake of his family. Meanwhile, Metropolimon, whose real name is Kanedoryu, is shown in his daily life. He attends a prestigious school and reveals his twisted nature during a conversation with his friend Mizukio. While Mizukio expresses petty desires, such as wanting to eliminate unattractive people and rivals who are more handsome than him, Kanade entertains more extreme thoughts, such as reviving the dead or eradicating nuclear weapons. Following their conversation, Metropolimon experiments with the arrows and discovers that combining the red and white arrows doubles their effective range to 60 meters. He later returns home, where he keeps the lifeless body of his younger sister in pristine condition. In a disturbing scene, he places flowers by her side to mark her birthday. Back with Mirai and Nanato, the latter introduces his angel, Barrett, a high-ranking angel of knowledge. They theorize that Metropolimon's angel is Misa, a special rank angel of desire. Nanato shares designs for suits to conceal their identities during their fight against Metropolimon. Later, they receive information about a new candidate, who appears to be a child, and note that there are still 5 unknown candidates. Soon, a shocking news report airs on television. A young female killer is on the loose in the city, leaving behind a note threatening to kill unattractive girls, a wish that directly reflects Mizukyo's twisted desires. Coincidence? Upon deeper investigation, the focus shifts to Mimi, a candidate for God who escaped from the reformatory by manipulating the guards with the red arrow, forcing them to act in her favor. Mimi, known for her psychopathic tendencies, kidnaps and emotionally manipulates her victims using the arrows. In a disturbing scene, she is shown with a student struck by the arrow and tied up, a situation interrupted by the arrival of Metropolimon, another candidate. Metropolimon, irritated by Mimi's choice of victims, orders her to target only ugly people according to his standards, reaffirming his twisted worldview. Meanwhile, Nanato explains to Mirai and Saki an important detail about angel wings. Ordinary humans can use them for 33 days if pierced by a red arrow. This revelation introduces a strategic dilemma in their fight against other candidates. Nanato suggests that Mimi could serve as bait to lure Metropolimon, but Mirai refuses to kill her with his white arrow. The tension rises when Nanato asks what Mirai would do if Metropolimon were about to attack, highlighting Mirai's inner conflict about resorting to violence as a solution. The next day, the news reports the discovery of another victim of Mimi on the roof of a building, following a pattern that Nanato begins to decipher. With this breakthrough, he meets with Saki and Mirai, introducing them to his angel and an arsenal of weapons, including a gun that Mirai refuses to use. Driven by love for his daughter and desperation to protect her, Nanato insists they must eliminate Metropolimon and any other threats, making it clear that he is willing to take on the role of a hero, even if only for his family. Mimi, meanwhile, continues to manipulate her victims, this time acting on a new directive from Metropolimon to leave the bodies in the same building to lure candidates capable of flight. In a chilling scene, Mimi uses her arrows on the police officers and detectives present, ordering them to guard the site and prevent anyone else from entering. This tactic puts Nanato and his team in a difficult position, as they recognize the trap but know they must confront it. Nanato devises a plan in which he will distract Mimi while Mirai attempts to attack Metropolimon. Before setting out, he ensures everyone is prepared, presenting special suits he had commissioned. Nanato also warns Mirai that if Metropolimon doesn't appear, he will eliminate Mimi with his gun, arguing that she is an uncontrollable danger to society. In the final confrontation, Mimi appears using her phone, seemingly unaware of the danger until Nanato confronts her with a gun aimed at her. Cunningly, Mimi reveals she is carrying a remotely controlled bomb, intending to further complicate her opponent's plan. Before they can react, Metropolimon activates the bomb, triggering an explosion that engulfs the entire building, leaving our protagonist caught between a rock and a hard place. Mirai watches as Nanato, injured but conscious, teeters on the edge of falling into the void after the explosion. He swiftly flies to save him, placing him on a nearby building. To Mirai's relief, Nanato's defensive suit managed to protect him from the blast. Without wasting a moment, Metropolimon appears behind Mirai, aiming his white arrow at him. However, Mirai remains steadfast, standing firm as Metropolimon confronts him with a cold and disdainful attitude, attempting to avoid showing weakness to his opponent. The villain insists that a few deaths are a small price to pay if the ultimate result is becoming God. Despite his injuries, Nanato slowly rises to his feet and joins Mirai, devising a strategy together to face Metropolimon. The plan is to trick Metropolimon into believing that Nanato, not Mirai, possesses the white arrow, distracting him long enough for them to counterattack. However, Metropolimon reveals that he has planted bombs in a nearby public building and threatens to detonate them unless they surrender. Analyzing the situation, Nanato asserts that Metropolimon is lying to unnerve them, but Metropolimon's angel confirms the bombs are real, complicating the situation. Tension hangs in the air as Metropolimon prepares to press the detonator. Desperate, Nanato offers himself as a sacrifice in exchange for allowing Mirai to escape unharmed. Metropoleman agrees but uses the opportunity to fire his white arrow at Minato. Acting on instinct, Mirai shoots his red arrow to intercept it, successfully halting the attack. At that moment, they discover that one arrow can counteract another, opening up new possibilities in the fight. To prevent Metropoleman from detonating the bombs, Mirai decides to confront him head-on, launching his red arrow in a direct attack. However, Metropoleman dodges the attack and repositions himself, attempting to fire his white arrow once more. Acting instinctively again, Mirai intercepts the projectile with his red arrow, saving Minato once more. Frustrated, Metropoleman fires multiple white arrows in different directions to overwhelm Mirai's defenses, but Mirai holds firm. The battle escalates into a direct exchange of arrows, with each side trying to outmatch the other. In a moment of distraction, Metropoleman attempts to attack Minato directly, but Mirai stops him just in time. Metropoleman's angel mocks Mirai, calling him pathetic, but Minato defends him, highlighting his bravery. During the confrontation, Minato takes advantage of a lapse in Metropoleman's focus and draws a gun, shooting him from behind. This act buys Mirai enough time to get close and fire his red arrow. When Mirai manages to wound him, Metropoleman's helmet cracks, revealing part of his face. This detail distracts Mirai for a few seconds, allowing Metropoleman to escape, bringing the battle to an end. Exhausted and injured, Mirai and Minato return home. Minato asks Mirai why he acted so recklessly. Mirai explains that he simply couldn't bear the thought of watching more people die. He recalls the times he endured bullying and abuse at the hands of his uncles, experiences that deeply scarred him but also gave him the drive to protect others. Meanwhile, Metropoleman, wounded from the gunshot, uses his arrow to control a doctor and have his injury treated. Once healed, he eliminates the doctor to leave no witnesses and vanishes into the night. The next day, at school, Saki overhears her classmates discussing the events at the tower. After classes, she notices Mirai waiting for her outside. Though her friend thinks they are dating, Saki denies it, explaining that Mirai is merely protecting her from bullies. Upon returning from school, Minato asks Nasse why Mirai lost the will to live. Surprisingly, even his angel doesn't know the exact answer. Nasse reveals that she chose him as a candidate for God because he attempted to end his life by throwing himself into the sea. Meanwhile, in another scene, we see Kanedoryu acting like a normal student. His classmates ask him about the visible injuries on his body, but he responds that he got them from falling down the stairs. Everyone believes him, except his friend Mizukio Minamikawa, who begins piecing together the clues, Kanede's injuries, and the events surrounding Metropoleman. Mizukio concludes that Kanede is actually Metropoleman but decides to act as though he doesn't know to avoid putting himself in danger. Elsewhere, Mirai's group gathers to discuss what they know about Metropoleman. Minato Mukado describes the antagonist's face as that of a young man 2 or 3 years older than him, with white hair, pale skin, and a prominent nose. That night, as Mirai tries to sleep, Saki approaches him and asks to stay together because she has something important to say. She asks Nasse and Revel to leave the room, leaving the two of them alone. Filled with regret, Saki confesses that she wants to die. She explains that she was Mirai's childhood friend, and they had promised to support each other. However, after Mirai's family died, she abandoned him and joined the schoolmates who bullied him. On the day Mirai attempted suicide, Saki saw him from a distance and brought a 4-leaf clover he had given her as a child. But when she saw him on the brink of taking his life, she couldn't intervene. Since then, she has blamed herself for contributing to Mirai's loss of hope. After her confession, Saki begs Mirai for forgiveness and asks him to end her life. Instead of responding, Mirai takes her hand and flies with her into the sky. He briefly lets go to test her true feelings, holding her with only one hand. Saki screams that, despite saying she wanted to die, it was a lie. She doesn't want to die and wants to live. She begs for forgiveness, and Mirai, smiling, assures her there's nothing to forgive. They return to the ground, and although they go back home, they decide to sleep apart. The next day, Minato speculates about Metropoleman's identity, while Saki surprises the group by declaring that she wants to help them, showing an optimistic attitude. Her newfound resolve leaves Minato and Mirai bewildered. Saki then suggests they secure a larger base of operations and mentions a church in a residential area that would be perfect for their meetings. Meanwhile, Metropoleman reflects on their last fight. He concludes that Minato never possessed the white arrow and realizes it is actually in Mirai's possession. At the same time, Mirai's group tries to find a way for Saki to acquire wings. Nasse explains that Saki could gain them if Mirai ascends to the first rank as a candidate for God, which requires him to gain more knowledge than his angel or for another candidate to die with Saki present. That evening, Minato spends time with his family and has an emotional conversation with his daughter, who discovers the wedding dress he had sewn for her. The little girl, not fully understanding the situation, comments that there was no need to make it so soon. Aware of his limited life expectancy, Nanato becomes deeply moved. After saying goodnight, he retreats to a room filled with dresses he had made and silently weeps, knowing he won't live long enough to see her wear them. Days later, a mysterious god candidate appears, threatening a man under the influence of a red arrow. However, the man, armed with a katana, defies the authority of the arrow, demanding the truth with a determination that seems to nullify its power. Meanwhile, Mirai Kakehashi and his group visit the church they have purchased. Revel, Saki's angel, gives them a book filled with inscriptions. Inside the church, they find Revel in a room surrounded by floating bubbles. He explains that these bubbles are celestial scriptures, memories of past gods and angels. Revel studies them fervently, seeking to ascend in rank and become more useful to Saki. Saki watches in admiration as Revel works, and soon he shows her a suit he has designed for her. The suit, featuring an adorable cat-inspired design, surprises everyone with its detail and creativity. Just at that moment, a red arrow streaks across the sky, heading towards Saki. Mirai intercepts it to protect her, only to discover it is one of Nanato's arrows. Barrett, Nanato's angel, explains that someone under the effect of his red arrow has been eliminated. At that moment, Nanato takes charge and asks Mirai to accompany him. Both put on their suits and fly to the location. When they arrive, they discover that the victim was a detective who had uncovered Nanato's identity, putting his family in danger. Alarmed, they head to Nanato's house, where they find no one except a young man with a katana named Hajime. Mirai attempts to strike him with a red arrow, but the stranger, with striking green and pink hair, escapes and flies to an abandoned amusement park. There, he has taken Nanato's family hostage. Hajime reveals his tragic story. He was born into extremely harsh circumstances, was poor, unattractive, abandoned by his father, and raised by a mother who worked in the adult industry. They lived under a bridge until one day, after returning from delivering newspapers, Hajime found his mother dead. Devastated, he attempted to take his own life, but an angel appeared and offered him the chance to become a god candidate. Using his red arrow, Hajime manipulated women to love him, but he remained dissatisfied with his appearance. Everything changed when he saw Metropoliman on the news. Hajime idolized him and decided to transform himself physically to resemble his hero. He spent all his money on plastic surgery and rigorous training until he achieved an attractive appearance. However, even with his new looks, he failed to win over a girl he was interested in, leaving him deeply frustrated. His obsession with Metropoliman only grew, especially after witnessing his exploits. Hajime conducted thorough research and, through connections at a hospital, discovered that a young man had inquired about preserving the body of his deceased sister. This clue led him to deduce Metropoliman's identity. Using his red arrow, Hajime manipulated a student into arranging a meeting with Metropoliman. During their encounter, Metropoliman sent a decoy as a precaution. Hajime, stunned, declared his loyalty and begged to serve as his subordinate. Metropoliman accepted, but only on one condition. Hajime had to capture a god candidate and imprison them in a cage. Back in the present, Hajime informs Metropoliman that he has captured Nanato's family. Although Hajime suggests using a red arrow on Nanato's wife, Metropoliman decides it would be more useful against another candidate. Meanwhile, back at the church, Nanato, filled with rage, receives a call from Metropoliman. He orders Nanato to go to the abandoned amusement park. Nanato rushes off, leaving Saki behind. Without wings to follow him, Saki feels powerless. Seeing her frustration, Revel intensifies his studies, determined to become a better support for her. At the abandoned amusement park, Nanato finds his family trapped inside a cage. Ignoring Mirai's warnings that it might be a trap, he rushes in to rescue them. Inside, he unties his wife from the ribbons binding her, and she confesses her love for him. These heartfelt words perplex Hajime, who has never understood the meaning of love. This moment triggers a deep reflection on his own emotional void. Meanwhile, Mirai draws his white arrow and aims it at Hajime. He fires deliberately off target, forcing Hajime to step back and away from the cage's trap. Nanato tries to break the structure's walls by firing at them, but his efforts prove futile. Taking advantage of the situation, Kanade orders Hajime Sakatani to position himself near Mirai to box him in. Using this strategy, Metropoliman threatens to use his white arrow, forcing Mirai to step inside the cage willingly to prevent worse outcomes. Once inside, Mirai instructs Nanato to take his family and use his wings to fly in circles, dodging any incoming arrow attacks. As this unfolds, Kanade explains to Hajime that they only need to wait for Nanato and Mirai to exhaust themselves. Hajime, who has never experienced love, cannot fathom why Nanato would risk his life for his family. The answer eludes him, leaving him deeply disturbed. Hours pass, and Mirai and Nanato continue flying tirelessly. In a clever maneuver, Nanato feigns an escape attempt, dramatically increasing his flight speed. Suddenly, a blinding burst of light envelops them, and they vanish, leaving Kanade and Hajime bewildered. However, Kanade assumes they are merely hiding and orders Hajime to remain on watch. A full day passes, and even the guardian angels remain unseen, unsettling Hajime further. Elsewhere, Saki Hanekeigo is overcome with sadness, feeling powerless to help. Her angel, Revel, is deeply moved by her despair. In an extraordinary event, Revel sheds tears, something never before seen in an angel. This rare phenomenon allows him to ascend to the highest angelic rank, granting him the ability to give Saki wings. With her newfound power, Saki flies to the amusement park, carefully avoiding Metropoliman's surveillance cameras. From a strategic vantage point, Saki fires a red arrow at Hajime, successfully striking him. This creates a conflict in his loyalty to Metropoliman as he begins to feel an overwhelming attraction to Saki. Hajime tries to warn Kanade about what has happened, but each time he looks at Saki, he falters, consumed by his internal struggle. When Kanade questions him, Hajime fabricates an excuse, claiming he needs to use the restroom, and asks Kanade to temporarily take his place. After abandoning his intercom, Hajime flies directly to Saki to formally introduce himself. With a solemn expression, he promises her that he will free her friends, swearing to do anything to make her happy. Determined, he begins striking the glass barrier trapping Nanato's family with his katana. Blow after blow, cracks start forming in the barrier. However, before Hajime can complete his task, the situation takes a dramatic turn. Flying in from above, a masked man, woman, and child join Metropoliman, launching a coordinated attack on Hajime. Meanwhile, Nanato notices a weak spot in the ceiling. Seizing the opportunity, he uses his gun to shatter it, creating a potential escape route. Saki urges Mirai to kill Metropoliman, but Mirai remains silent, his pacifist ideals preventing him from taking a life. Nanato steps forward, asking if everyone is ready to proceed with the plan to stop Metropoliman. Before the impending battle, the trio agree to shoot each other with red arrows simultaneously, ensuring mutual trust and eliminating any risk of manipulation. Hajime also joins the fight, showing his loyalty to Saki by stepping into the fray. The battle begins in earnest as Ryuji, the masked man, opens fire with a machine gun, spraying bullets at anyone in his path. Hajime intercepts him, declaring that he will fight to protect Saki. Thus, a frenetic aerial combat ensues, with swords clashing against bullets at dizzying speeds. Although Ryuji's bullets are swift, the angel wings grant Hajime unparalleled agility, allowing him to evade with ease. Determined to gain the upper hand, Ryuji pulls out a bazooka and fires at Hajime from behind. The missile misses its target, hitting a nearby power tower instead, reducing it to rubble. Thinking Hajime is defeated, Ryuji momentarily lets his guard down. However, Hajime reappears behind him, katana poised for an attack. Ryuji narrowly dodges the strike, forcing the fight to continue in the skies. While Ryuji is locked in combat with Hajime, Saki and Mirai take advantage of the distraction to corner him using their wings. Working in unison, they propel Ryuji toward Hajime, who seizes the opportunity. From a strategic position, Hajime lands a precise strike, severing Ryuji's right arm. Disarmed and gravely injured, Ryuji plummets to the ground, effectively incapacitated. Amidst the chaos, the masked woman, identified as a scientist named Fayuko, escalates the stakes. She reveals a deadly virus capable of airborne transmission, threatening to release it and cause the deaths of thousands. The gravity of the situation intensifies, making it clear that any misstep in this battle could have catastrophic consequences. Under immense pressure, Fayuko reveals that the venom she carries is rigged to release upon her death, threatening widespread catastrophe. She announces her plan to inject herself if her demands are not met. Metropoliman seizes control of the situation, declaring that Mirai must be their first target. Left with no choice, Mirai descends to the Ferris wheel platform where Fayuko waits, prepared for confrontation. Observing Mirai's precarious position, Saki grows increasingly distraught but understands that any interference could lead to dire consequences. Mirai cautiously approaches Fayuko. In a tense moment, she attempts to pierce his protective suit with a syringe, only to discover it is impenetrable. Using this to his advantage, Mirai disarms her with his wings and grabs her wrist firmly. Still, Fayuko threatens to manually release the venom as a last resort. Refusing to relent, Mirai deploys his white arrow, eliminating the virus cluster instantly. It is revealed that the virus was composed of human cells, making it an exceptionally potent threat. With Fayuko restrained, the group demands she be eliminated. However, Mirai faces a moral quandary, unable to bring himself to kill her. Amid the confusion, Nanato seizes Ryuji's machine gun and prepares to end Fayuko himself. At that moment, Metropolimon fires 2 arrows toward Mirai while Fayuko retaliates by flinging syringes of venom to thwart his escape. In a surge of emotion, Saki, driven by her red arrow-induced love, shields Mirai with her own body. Metropolimon's white arrow, however, veers back toward Mirai, forcing him to block it with his own white arrow as the syringes race towards Saki. In a desperate act of love and loyalty, Hajime slices through the cables directing the syringes with his katana, halting 2 of them. Unfortunately, he misses the third, which hurtles dangerously close to Saki. With no other options, Hajime places himself in its path, taking the venom to save her. The poison takes immediate effect, and Hajime begins to deteriorate, sacrificing his life for Saki's safety. In his final moments, Hajime strikes down Fayuko with his katana, ending the threat she posed. Both succumb to their injuries as 2 angels descend, escorting their souls to the afterlife. Meanwhile, Nanato collapses, weakened by his worsening cancer. He drops the gun and falls to the ground, unable to continue fighting. Seeing an opportunity, Metropolimon fires a white arrow at Nanato, but Mirai swoops in, rescuing him from certain death. In the ensuing chaos, Metropolimon attempts to recruit the masked child, Suzumu, who resembles Donald Trump, to his side. Suzumu, however, refuses and flees, leaving Metropolimon to face Mirai alone. With a sense of justice, Mirai vows not to execute Metropolimon but to bring him to justice before the law. Armed with a red arrow, he threatens to strip Metropolimon of his wings and arrows unless he cooperates. Metropolimon counters with a proposal for a direct duel. The winner will be the first to strike with their arrow. Mirai agrees, but only under clear rules. He suggests they take turns shooting without moving their feet. Confident in his abilities, Metropolimon accepts, setting the stage for a decisive showdown. During the confrontation, Nanato finds himself on the ground and, in desperation, pleads with Mirai. He urges him that if he manages to pierce Metropolimon with the red arrow, he must stop him, even if it means killing him with his own hands. If Mirai cannot bring himself to do it, Nanato asks to be allowed to take on the task himself. After this tense moment, Metropolimon suggests deciding the duel by flipping a coin. However, in an unexpected move, he distracts Mirai and fires his white arrow at him. Mirai, reacting quickly, uses his red arrow to defend himself, successfully blocking the attack. Metropolimon warns Mirai that he must advance if he wants any chance of succeeding. With determination, Mirai takes a few steps forward and fires his red arrow. However, Metropolimon effortlessly dodges it and arrogantly tells Mirai that there is nothing he can do that Metropolimon cannot overcome. In response, Nanato angrily retorts that Metropolimon is deluding himself into thinking he is a god. Amidst the battle, Metropolimon recalls a moment from his past with his younger sister, to whom he had gifted a beautiful rose garden. She had called him a god because he always fulfilled her every wish. This memory reveals that they came from an ultra-wealthy family and highlights Metropolimon's obsession with his sister's purity and beauty, which he sought to protect from any external influences, particularly those from lower social classes. To him, money and appearance were the foundations of happiness. In this memory, we see his sister confiding in him that she had fallen in love with a boy and planned to date him. This revelation enraged Metropolimon, who believed her innocence and purity would be tainted. In an attempt to control her, he told her it was too soon to have a boyfriend, but she defended herself, saying the boy was a good person. When she tried to leave, Metropolimon grabbed her arm forcefully, causing an accident. His sister stumbled and fell from the heights of the rose garden. In her final moments, the young girl told her brother she felt dizzy before passing away due to a head injury. Devastated, Metropolimon considered calling the police but changed his mind when he realized that if he did nothing, his sister would remain beautiful and young forever. In his obsession, he decided to preserve her body, consulting a doctor on how to keep it intact. However, the guilt consumed him, and he was on the verge of taking his own life before being saved by the angel who chose him as a candidate to become God. Back in the present, Metropolimon, inspired by his delusions, fires another white arrow at Mirai, who blocks it with his red arrow. Both of them continue closing the distance between each other step by step as the confrontation is broadcast live on national television. During the combat, Metropolimon, brimming with confidence, declares that he doesn't care about the origins of angels or aliens, only absolute power. Meanwhile, national security forces attempt to locate those responsible for the broadcast. The battle rages on as Kanade launches another red arrow, narrowly missing Mirai, who barely evades it, placing himself in a disadvantageous position. The gap between them continues to shrink, and Mirai begins to gain ground. Metropoleman, attempting to provoke him, mocks his life, suggesting he is nothing more than an ordinary, poor boy. Enraged, Mirai shouts back that there should be no distinctions between superior and inferior people. Arrogantly, Metropoleman declares that if he were to become God, he would create a world where everyone is rich, eradicating the poor and unattractive. His words, broadcast live, divide the audience. Some support him, others reject him, while others see him as a joke. Finally, Metropoleman states he would allow a few poor people to live as slaves. Mirai, however, cuts him off, demanding they continue the fight. Everyone knows that if Mirai gets caught up in Kanade's mind games, he risks losing the battle. Mirai and Metropoleman stand face to face, barely 5 meters apart. The tension in the air is palpable as both evaluate their next moves. Kanade mockingly asks why Mirai doesn't attack by surprise. However, Mirai remains silent, focused on what's to come. Finally, he sprints towards Metropoleman, a strategy that catches his opponent off guard. Metropoleman responds by firing a point-blank white arrow, but Mirai effortlessly blocks it with his red arrow. In a swift move, Mirai leaps towards Metropoleman, attempting to pierce him with the red arrow. However, it fails to penetrate his opponent's body, revealing that he already has a red arrow embedded within him. Seizing the moment, Metropoleman draws a white arrow to counterattack, but Mirai manages to push him away, destabilizing him. Mirai then spreads his wings, grabs Metropoleman's arm, and uses one of his wings to obscure his opponent's vision, preventing him from aiming his next attack effectively. Desperate, Metropoleman pulls out a hidden knife from his suit and tries to stab Mirai. However, Mirai's suit is armored, rendering the attack useless. In response, Mirai delivers a kick to Metropoleman's abdomen, momentarily throwing him off balance. Meanwhile, Metropoleman calls on his angel for assistance in transferring the white arrow to his free arm, but receives no response. Mirai takes advantage of the chaos to gain the upper hand. With Saki's help, he uses the arrow rings as makeshift handcuffs, completely immobilizing Metropoleman. With no other option, Metropoleman tries to escape by deploying his wings, but Mirai and Saki manage to restrain him once again, using their own wings for support. At this critical moment, Nanato, who has been gravely ill due to cancer, decides to take action. Though his strength is nearly gone, he picks up his machine gun and aims it at Metropoleman. In his final moments, Metropoleman recalls his family before being gunned down by Nanato. The bullets pierce Metropoleman's armor, fatally wounding him in a quick but brutal manner. The scene is broadcast live on television, and the audience, who once saw Metropoleman as a savior, now celebrates his downfall. After Metropoleman's death, the atmosphere shifts. The red arrow embedded in him returns to its owner, along with the rings, wings, and other arrows. The angels appear to collect the souls of both Metropoleman and Hajime, leaving Mirai, Saki, and Nanato to grapple with the aftermath of the battle. At the hospital, Nanato's condition is critical. Despite the doctor's efforts, who have been influenced by Nanato's arrows to follow his orders, they can only extend his life by a few minutes. In a final act of love, Nanato calls his family to say goodbye. His daughter, deeply affected, watches him in silence. Aware of his impending end, Nanato attempts to light a cigarette, but it slips from his hands before he can enjoy it. At that moment, his vital signs cease, and Nanato passes away unconscious. Barrett, Nanato's angel, gently collects his soul, expressing sorrow for the actions his charge took during his life. As a final gesture of gratitude, Barrett gives Nanato's wings and arrows to Mirai and Saki, who must now carry on his legacy and face the challenges that lie ahead. With this, Barrett ascends to the heavens, taking Nanato's soul with him. As night falls, the crime scene becomes the focal point of national security. Investigators meticulously examine the remains of Metropoleman and the technology embedded in his suit, seeking clues to trace its origin and uncover his true identity. The lead detective, acutely aware of the situation's gravity, expands the investigation to locate the other god candidates. At the hospital, Mirai is consumed by guilt over Nanato's death, burdened by a sense of responsibility for the events that transpired. Saki attempts to comfort him, reminding him that Nanato's sacrifice saved countless lives. As Mirai turns away, he notices the red arrow embedded in Saki's chest glowing intensely. Though he suspects its influence on her words, Saki assures him that her feelings are genuine. She reveals that even before being struck by the arrow, she harbored affection for him, feelings now strengthened by their shared experiences. Her angel affirms Saki's honesty, offering silent support. Mirai unveils a disturbing revelation. Metropoleman was under someone else's control, evidenced by the red arrow lodged in his chest. Concurrently, it is revealed that Hajime's angel, who disseminates information, has allied with the angel of a boy who broadcasted the battle. In a flashback, the boy, Suzumu Yuito, is seen striking Metropolimon with a red arrow while secretly observing him at school. Using the arrow's influence, Suzumu convinces Metropolimon to bring him home and secure his promise to safeguard his belongings should anything happen. Back in the present, Saki attempts to cheer Mirai by preparing a special meal, despite fearing it may not turn out well. Meanwhile, Mirai, with the guidance of Nasse, formulates strategies to confront the remaining candidates, assessing who possesses arrows or wings. When Saki brings him the food, she finds him asleep beside Nanato's suit remnants. She gently covers him with a blanket and, on impulse, leans in to kiss him. However, upon hearing Mirai murmur Nanato's name in his sleep, she refrains. The next morning, Mirai wakes to the sight of Saki making breakfast. She explains that the angels are granting the candidates space to reflect. During the meal, Mirai takes a bite and is visibly shocked. Mistaking his reaction for the food being too spicy, Saki begins to worry. Mirai, however, reveals something surprising. Years of abuse and malnutrition had dulled his sense of taste. But now, for the first time in years, he can savor food. Meanwhile, the remaining candidates convene. Many, complacent with the privileges granted by their arrows and wings, show little interest in becoming God. None responded when asked who would accept the role. At this juncture, Penema, the angel of games, announces that her candidate, Suzumu Yuito, is particularly active in the selection process. This revelation stirs the group. Suzumu, the boy who manipulated Metropolimon, is now freely flying across the city. A bystander manages to capture a photo of him, and the image goes viral, confirming his status as a candidate. Away from the turmoil, Saki reminisces about their carefree childhood and shares sandwiches with Mirai. His smile grows as he expresses his wish for lasting happiness between them. Simultaneously, Suzumu shocks the world by appearing on national television for an interview. He reveals that he is a 6th grade student and that he became a candidate not due to suicidal thoughts, but out of sheer boredom. He explains that his parents were perpetually absent, leaving him friendless and lonely. One night, while arranging pills he had found, his angel appeared. During the interview, Suzumu divulges key details about the wings, arrows, and the process of choosing the new god. He candidly admits to manipulating Metropolimon and proposes a radical idea, a global vote to elect the next god from among the 6 remaining candidates. To achieve this, he urges the public to locate and expose the candidates' identities. In a bold move, Suzumu ends his broadcast by showing a picture of Mirai on his phone, declaring, "I vote for Mirai to be the next god." After Suzumu proposes that the other candidates vote for Mirai to become the new god, one of the candidates is shown enjoying her luxurious lifestyle. She tells her angel that she also supports Mirai as a positive change. Meanwhile, Saki asks Revel if it is enough for everyone to approve someone to make them god. Revel explains that Mirai must first declare himself as god, but he cannot do so under the effects of a red arrow. However, if he uses the white arrow, he could become god. Elsewhere, Suzumu is seen distracted by his mobile phone when the police suddenly intervene to capture him. A group of soldiers surrounds him and starts shooting, but Suzumu uses the speed of his wings to escape. Later, Mirai, who is on a date with Saki, now his girlfriend, watches on television as several eliminated candidates are publicly revealed. They also discover rumors on social media suggesting that Mirai could be a candidate due to his seemingly perfect life, good grades, a new girlfriend, and his popularity after defeating Metropolimon. Mirai notices a man watching them, so he takes Saki by the arm, and they run away from the area. Meanwhile, high-ranking Japanese officials discuss the candidates, considering them a threat comparable to nuclear weapons. Back with Mirai, Saki suggests they run away together to a place where no one can find them. However, Mirai realizes that these ideas are influenced by the red arrow and reassures her, saying that no one will find them if they act like normal students. Days later, despite feeling self-conscious about her scars, Saki decides to go to school with Mirai, where they spend the day listening to rumors about the candidates for God. When returning home, Mirai is stopped by a national security detective, Nasse, who tells him that his superiors want to arrest him. However, the detective believes this is a mistake. Nasse then asks about his arrows, which seem to intrigue him. Mirai steps back, sensing a trap, and uses his wings to stay alert. Although Nasse cannot see the arrows or the wings, He deduces their presence from Mirai's posture. Nasse mentions that Saki is with one of his subordinates, named Manami, prompting Mirai to rush to the temple where she is. Upon arriving, he discovers that Saki has shot the detective with a red arrow. Nasse explains that his fiancée is also under the influence of the red arrow, and that he wants to protect them because their identities will soon be revealed publicly. Mirai and Saki agree to go with Nasse after he offers to help them since the candidates are now being pursued by many countries. He takes them to his apartment, where he gives them disposable mobile phones and advises them not to leave to avoid detection. Nasse then explains that the government has ordered the arrest of all candidates, as other countries are looking to use them as weapons. He also mentions that some suspects have been identified, such as a cult leader who proclaims himself God. That night, Mirai investigates the leader, Kazuma, and confirms he is a fraud when he does not react to a red arrow. Meanwhile, Saki suggests that Manami, who is under the influence of the red arrow, should be given the arrow for protection while they continue investigating other suspicious candidates, including a friend of Metropoliman and some students who recently lost their families. The following day, Mirai appears in front of Mizukio, who had just dropped his girlfriend off at her home. Unsurprisingly, the young man goes pale upon seeing a hooded and threatening figure before him. Mizukio begs Mirai for his life, assuring him that he has no intention of causing harm. Mirai, doubting his sincerity, decides to swap his white arrow for the red one and shoots it at Mizukio, bringing him under his control. Under its effect, Mizukio confesses to being a god candidate. Mirai, proceeding cautiously, orders him to stay with the group. Mizukio reveals that his angel is the Angel of Dreams, a second-rank angel, explaining why he only possesses the red arrow and not the white one. After this encounter, the group decides to search for other candidates. They arrive at the house of a young man whose family is on the brink of collapse. Overwhelmed by despair, the boy is about to take his own life and also plans to do the same to his brother. Before he can act, Mirai uses his red arrow as a shield to block the boy's arrow. At that moment, they discover that his angel is the Angel of Darkness and confirm that the boy is not a special rank candidate. Hearing this, the boy, named Mizukio, confesses that he is not a candidate and had lied, believing that if he said otherwise, Mirai would kill him. He admits to lying to protect himself. Shuji asks the group to use the white arrow so he can die alongside his brother. He reveals a tragic past. His grandfather had been gravely ill, so he used the red arrow to make him take his own life and end his suffering. He also shares that his mother had been unfaithful to his father, leading to their divorce and causing him to fall into a deep depression. In his desperation, Shuji used the arrow again, asking his father to die, and found him lifeless in a lake the next day. He even used it on his mother and her lover. Despite his dark past, Shuji insists he does not want to become God but had planned to use the red arrow to help others end their suffering. However, Mirai points out that his actions constitute a crime. The boy, unaware of this, promises not to use the arrow in that way again. Before leaving the group, Shuji asks to end his brother's suffering and then take his own life. Mirai intervenes, reminding him that, even if it seems he has no friends or people who value him, his death would still affect others. The group talks with him, trying to make him reconsider his decision and think more clearly. After their heartfelt words, Shuji reconsiders and decides not to use the arrow against his brother or himself for the time being. He then agrees to join the group to help in the process of selecting the next god. Meanwhile, the government begins to publicly acknowledge the existence of the candidates, although much of the population remains skeptical. At this moment, Mirai and Saki fly over the city in their suits, addressing the citizens about the selection process. Suddenly, Suzumu Yuito appears, shooting a red arrow at Mirai to confirm if he is truly the real one. Mirai blocks the attack, proving his authenticity, which excites Suzumu. Afterward, Mirai asks to speak with him privately. In the sky, Mirai reveals both his and Saki's faces, asking Suzumu if he possesses the white arrow and requesting his cooperation. Suzumu agrees, and together they plan their next move. The group decides to search for Yuri Temari, a candidate kidnapped by the government. At night, the angels pass through the walls of the place where she is being held and explain the plan to her, to gather all the candidates before the world so that the last candidate will appear, enabling a peaceful election to take place. Yuri agrees to cooperate, and they begin devising a strategy to free her without raising suspicion. However, she warns them that the location is monitored by cameras 24/7, making their task a challenging one. The minister reports that the troops were only sent to capture the candidates, not to attack them, and to safeguard the citizens. However, Gaku insists they are not a threat and should not be attacked but rather protected. He assures that within 24 hours, he will be able to prove this, as he possesses vital information to support his claim. With the arrival of helicopters, the candidates decide to disperse, moving to different locations across the country. Shortly afterward, they receive a message announcing that the minister has withdrawn all military troops. However, several drones appear and surround them. Amidst this tension, the candidates decide to speak in front of television cameras about their plans if they were chosen to become God, hoping that the last candidate will reveal themselves. One by one, they share their visions of an ideal world. Shuji speaks of a world where people can die whenever they wish. Although many oppose this idea, some support it. Iri proposes a world without work. Then, Suzumu mentions a world where everyone can have white arrows. However, he adds that being a candidate is fun, so he would create a world where everyone had white arrows. Saki, on the other hand, dreams of a world where everyone is kind and smiles. Finally, Mirai declares that if he were God, he would do nothing because he believes every person should live by their own means. This was clearly not the speech anyone expected to hear from our candidate. After these statements, the candidates gather again and call on the last candidate, inviting them to join them for a discussion. In response, the mysterious individual finally appears, surprising everyone. Shuji recognizes him as a renowned professor and Nobel Prize winner. Mirai suggests they go somewhere more private to talk, but the newcomer refuses, insisting that the entire world deserves to hear what he has to say. The new candidate presents an intriguing theory. He claims that Metropoliman was right to doubt the existence of a real god. According to him, the god who organized this selection is false. Addressing Mirai, he asks why he decided he would do nothing if chosen as god. Mirai replies that every human being must find their own path and rely on themselves. Gaku then introduces another theory. He suggests that humanity existed before any concept of God. He discusses the evolution of species and suggests that God is merely an accumulation of thoughts created by people who believe in him. However, he argues that nowadays, with fewer believers, this god has fallen into despair and deceived the angels to initiate the selection of candidates. Gaku adds that his plan was to broadcast the selection of the new god to the entire world, believing this would renew people's faith in divinity. However, Gaku urges them to stop relying on gods and instead place their trust in other humans. He argues that science and technology will soon surpass any need for a divine being. He declares that humanity does not need any god. As these statements are broadcast, a group of snipers prepares to attack the candidates. Revel, the most knowledgeable angel, shares details about heaven and explains that human prayers constitute the power of God. However, he suspects that some angels already know the truth and choose not to intervene. The candidates begin to doubt Gaku's theories, except Shuji, who seems convinced that he is correct. Yuri asks if there is a way to avoid the obligation of choosing a god. Gaku responds that there is indeed an alternative. Just then, Yuito detects the presence of armed soldiers and alerts the group. Noticing the threat, Suzumu innocently attempts to use his red arrow to control them, but Mirai shouts for him to stop and withdraw. However, a soldier fires, and the bullet strikes Saki, leaving the group stunned. The soldiers begin firing frantically, forcing the candidates to fly at maximum speed to dodge the bullets. Amidst the chaos, Mirai tries to reach Suzumu's body, but Gaku Yonda appears and takes it in his arms before Mirai can. Gaku swiftly moves away, seeking a safe place as bullets continue to rain down. Given the severity of Suzumu's injuries, Gaku concludes he will not survive. Without hesitation, he pulls out his white arrow, pierces Suzumu with it, and absorbs all his rings of wings and arrows. Meanwhile, at Detective Hoshi's house, the candidates receive a call from Suzumu's phone. When they answer, they discover it is Gaku speaking. He asks them to put the call on speaker and, without mincing words, informs them that Suzumu is dead and that he now possesses all his rings. Before hanging up, he adds that his intention was to observe people's reactions before reuniting with them. The conversation then ends abruptly. In a distant location, Gaku asks Shuji if he would be willing to be pierced by the white arrow. Shuji straightforwardly replies that he would. Gaku takes the opportunity to pose a hypothetical scenario. If he handed Shuji the white arrow, would he use it against him? Shuji's answer is yes, as he respects Gaku greatly and accepts any decision he makes. For added security, Gaku decides to pierce Shuji with a red arrow to ensure his loyalty. Meanwhile, in the heavens, one of the angels arrives with Suzumu's soul. Other angels inform him that they are in serious trouble. God is dying. The following day, news outlets reveal the identities of all the candidates. In light of this, Detective Hoshi decides to take them to a completely isolated shelter, free of cameras and windows, to ensure their safety, given that there are still those who wish to capture them. During a conversation in the shelter, Mirai suggests they speak with Yonda. The detective agrees with the idea and says he will also attempt to talk to the professor, as they know each other from secondary school. He reveals that Gaku was so brilliant that he dropped out just 2 weeks after starting, preferring to study alone as he didn't want friends or even to meet new people. In the present, Yonda speaks with Shuji, confessing that his desire to die was driven by profound curiosity. He wanted to know if the experience of death was real and if there was an afterlife. According to him, the concept of another world is nothing more than an illusion created by a creature pretending to be God, drawing energy from humans. Gaku now raises the stakes and plans to go further to reveal the truth to humanity. He asks Agero, the angel of darkness who knows the other side of heaven, if he is the angel with special powers or if it is another. However, as they know, angels are forbidden from speaking about such matters. The professor threatens to prevent the candidates from becoming those creatures and considers using his white arrow on Nakami, though the boy would accept it with honor. This leaves Agero in a difficult position, as his mission as an angel is to ensure his chosen one reaches God without dying in the process. Eventually, Agero agrees to talk, but under one condition. Gaku must give his companion Suzumu's white arrow, assuring him that Shuji, under the influence of the red arrow, will not use the white arrow against Yonda, allowing him to proceed with his plans. Now that everything is discussed, the angel reveals a crucial detail. The special angel might be Nasse, as she possesses the unique ability to touch her candidate and earthly objects, something no other angel can do. Nasse even saved Mirai from falling into the void on one occasion, although she seems unaware of her own power. With this information, Gaku contacts the Prime Minister and organizes a meeting with all the candidates in a stadium, setting the stage for the next phase of his plan. After more than a month, the effect of the red arrows wears off on the detectives. To maintain their support and abilities, Mirai decides to pierce the detective with another red arrow. In turn, the detective uses a red arrow on his fiancée, ensuring her loyalty. That same night, Gaku flies directly to the Prime Minister, using his arrows on the security guards. He also pierces the Prime Minister with a red arrow, ensuring his control and enabling him to manipulate the state. Days later, the Prime Minister announced on national television Gaku Yonda's intentions to meet with the other candidates. On camera, he declares that the government will provide the Olympic Stadium for a discussion about the election of the new god and will ensure the area is cleared and secured. Subsequently, Gaku appears via video call, asserting that the world doesn't need a god, let alone a false godlike creature. He requests that no one attempts to kill the candidates. Intrigued by Gaku's statements, Mirai and the others ask their angels if what he said is true. The angels confirm the last surviving candidate will become the new god. However, if all candidates die simultaneously, the position will remain vacant. This revelation shifts the dynamics among the candidates, who now face the challenge of creating a new plan. Some in the group distrust the professor's motives and argue that killing him would be the best course of action. Others oppose this, saying that doing so would make them no better than Metropoliman. That night, Mirai reflects on the state of the world with concern. He notes that only 10% of the population continues to believe in God, compared to 50% before Gaku's statements. This decline in faith worries him, as even if someone becomes God, they may not be accepted by humanity. Saki directly asks him if he truly wishes to become God. Mirai, with determination, answers yes. In response, Saki asks to be alone with him one last time, as if it were a farewell. Meanwhile, during a dinner with the Prime Minister, Gaku negotiates with representatives from other countries. He proposes an agreement to ensure that all the candidates die simultaneously, thereby preventing the creation of a new god. The international leaders consider his proposal and appear to lean in favor of the plan. Elsewhere, Mirai and Saki have a private conversation about everything they've experienced together. They reflect on how their lives have changed since being chosen as candidates. With the sunrise as their backdrop, Mirai expresses gratitude that they've survived thus far and thanks Saki for her love and support. Hand in hand, they return to the shelter. Several hours later, the much-anticipated candidate meeting begins. Mirai, Saki, and their allies wait in the center of the stadium alongside Nasse. The first to arrive are Yonda and Shuji, accompanied by the detective and his fiancée. Upon seeing Gaku, the detective attempts to start a conversation, but Gaku coldly interrupts him. Yonda tersely recalls their brief encounters and the length of each conversation, then pointedly remarks that they were never friends. He dismisses any personal recollections, refocusing on the purpose of the meeting to discuss his plan. Gaku presents his proposal to prevent the creation of a false god. He suggests that the remaining candidates collaborate to eliminate one another, thereby ensuring that no one takes the place of God. He also shares a theory: if they manage to kill each other within seconds of one another, they could prevent the birth of a new divine entity. Meanwhile, Mirai silently devises a plan to use his red arrow to persuade Gaku to vote for him as the new god. However, he knows he must be strategic and choose the perfect moment, as he is aware of Gaku's meticulous calculations. Gaku asks Mirai to speak in private, but Detective Hoshi insists on accompanying them, ensuring not to interfere. Once alone, Gaku directly asks Mirai if he is willing to become god. Mirai responds affirmatively, explaining that, although he does not personally desire the role, many people rely on their religious beliefs to live meaningful lives. However, Gaku remains unconvinced. While he understands Mirai's desire to save as many lives as possible, he makes it clear that he cannot accept the existence of a god and will have to kill him, as he will not allow him to take on that role. At that moment, Mirai draws his white arrow, holding it downward as a symbol of his decision. Meanwhile, Shuji, who has stayed with the rest of the group, threatens to use his white arrow on anyone who opposes the professor's plan. Manami quickly reacts, immobilizing Shuji and attempting to pierce him with a red arrow to break the professor's control over him. Unfortunately, they realize the red arrow has no effect because Shuji is already under the influence of the professor's arrow. Now, the entire group's fate hinges on what happens with Mirai. Back with Mirai and Gaku, the situation escalates as Gaku tries to pressure him further. He takes out his phone and shows a photo of Saki in danger, threatening to harm her if Mirai does not renounce becoming god within 28 seconds. Heartbroken, Mirai decides to give up his claim to save Saki's life. However, this decision deeply disappoints Gaku, who accuses him of sacrificing the well-being of millions for the sake of one life. The tension peaks as Gaku draws his own white arrow. Although Mirai has renounced becoming god, Gaku remains unwilling to let him live. He confronts him, stating that unless Mirai allows himself to be struck by the white arrow, the situation will not be resolved. Gaku raises the stakes, forcing Mirai to choose between his own life and Saki's. As the seconds tick by, Mirai's mind floods with memories of his moments with Saki, his primary motivation to keep going. Finally, Gaku releases his arrow, and Mirai, resolute, stands still. He declares that some lives are worth more than his own and accepts his fate. In an ultimate act of self-sacrifice, Mirai allows himself to be struck by the white arrow, sealing his decision and demonstrating that his humanity and compassion transcend any title or divine power. Just as the arrow is about to strike Mirai, Nasse grabs him and flies away to save his life. However, for reasons unknown, she suddenly stops mid-air, falls silent, and ultimately lets him go. As Mirai plummets, a dark sphere envelops Nasse, beginning to absorb her. This happens because Nasse interfered in the battle, causing her to be demoted to a second-rank angel, losing both her wings and her white arrow. After a few moments, Nasse is released, but the consequences are severe. Half of her body has turned to stone. Gaku once again threatens Mirai, warning him that if he continues to resist, someone else will die. He hurls another white arrow, forcing Mirai to choose between defending himself or sacrificing his life. Just as the arrow nears him, Saki unexpectedly appears, pulling Mirai out of harm's way and fleeing with him. How did Saki get there? Shuji, who had held her captive, decided to release her, as he cannot bring himself to kill someone who does not wish to die. Saki's bold action shocks everyone. Despite fearing for her own life, she chose to save Mirai. In response, Gaku, with an authoritative tone, demands that Shuji return the arrow he claims as his own. Amidst the mounting tension, Yuri appears behind Yonda, ready to attack with her white arrow. However, before she can release it, the group is stunned by Nasse, who, weakened and partially petrified, speaks up. She expresses a desire to spare Gaku from suffering and ends up saving him instead. Her words deeply move the group, serving as a poignant reminder that humanity and compassion still have a role in this battle. Demonstrating a new level of selflessness, Nasse offers her wings and the white arrow to Gaku once more. However, he refuses, leaving everyone, especially Nasse, in profound confusion. The angel, who has saved Gaku on multiple occasions, begins to question her decisions and the true purpose of her existence. Meanwhile, in an effort to prevent further escalation, Yonda makes an unexpected proposal. He promises Mirai that, if he agrees to become god, he will reveal the true nature of heaven. This offer leaves Mirai astonished and filled with doubts about the cost of his life and the implications of such a decision. Upon accepting the proposal, the ritual to select God begins. The remaining candidates and angels surround Shuji, and in that instant, everything turns gray. Wings and arrows vanish, and time itself appears to stop. Only the candidates retain memories of the events surrounding the god selection process. At the end of the ritual, the candidates face a pivotal question: whether to keep their memories or erase them entirely. Mirai and Saki choose to retain their memories, cherishing the experiences they've lived, while Yuri opts to forget everything. Shortly afterward, the new god merges with the former one, vanishing from existence. In that moment, time resumes its normal flow. The detectives and Yuri, having forgotten the events, are left baffled by what has transpired. After the previous events, we see Yuri Temari becoming Gaku Yonda's assistant, helping him with his research on the divine arrows, even though she can no longer see them. Meanwhile, Mirai Kakehashi visits Saki Hanakego's parents to announce his intention to marry their daughter. Saki's parents happily give their blessing to the engagement. Later, Mirai and Saki go for a walk together and eventually return to their home, where they begin living alone as a couple. Sometime later, Nasse watches from the sky as Mirai and Saki celebrate their wedding. The joy of seeing them happy fills Nasse with contentment, but she is interrupted by another angel, Revel, who informs her that God is calling for her. Nasse goes to meet with God, who asks if she remembers what she was before becoming an angel. Nasse admits she does not. Nasse expresses concern for God, who seems sadder than before, and after this brief encounter, she returns to her duties. Meanwhile, God observes the former candidates and their new lives. Noticing that they all appear happy, he feels a fleeting sense of satisfaction. However, as he focuses on his divine work, he sees the souls of people who are about to die. He becomes deeply troubled upon realizing how many people take their own lives or kill one another, prompting him to question how the world can be so cruel. At one point, after reflecting on the darkness of the world, he extends his hand, and a bright sphere appears before him. What happens next is devastating. The angels begin to vanish one by one. One angel looks upon God again and discovers that he has taken his own life. Shocked, the angel declares that heaven has ended and vanishes as well. Nasse, witnessing all of this, disintegrates along with the other angels. In the human world, the disintegration extends to all the young people, who also disappear. Mirai and Saki, realizing what is happening, hold each other tightly before vanishing together.